Hello and welcome to What the Tech. I'm your host Ryan Ashton, or Ryan the Lion, and What the Tech is one of our Yarn Live variations where we go deep into a subject specifically focused on tech. And today's subject is why integration is key to digital transformation. And the other person on screen that you can see there, Nikolai Blackie, will introduce himself in a moment. He's the principal architect and co-founder of Adaptiv. You'll see his face and company brand on the bottom of the screen there. So as always with anything to do with a yarn, a few quiet yarns, we'll ask you, Nikolai, to introduce yourself first so we can meet the person, and then we'll definitely get into the business as we talk about integration, why it's key to digital transformation. And of course, if you're watching, feel free to ask any questions, put them in the comments, and feel free to add comments and get engaged with us, because that's the whole point of What the Tech, the opportunity to talk to one of the experts. So, Nikolai, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nikolai Blackie, co-founder of Adaptiv Integration. I guess things about me. I have two teenage daughters, which keeps me on my toes. I'm a semi-professional barbecuer, as you can tell by my chins. I spend a large amount of my time in the weekends starting cooks at lunchtime and finishing somewhere around 9 o'clock at night. And I also have a classic car that likes to brake on me all the time.
Fantastic, a classic car. There's a few classic cars out there in the industry. Can we ask what your one is in particular?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. We have had from a 1964 Volvo through to I think it was about a 1970 something Ford Cortina, which was converted into a race car. So obviously two different ends of the spectrum. So yeah, sounds like I've got to get around to yours for one of those barbecues too. I haven't had a barbecue out this summer, and it's almost winter, so that's a bit of on my behalf.
Yeah, we have a barbecue today on the deck at work, so looking forward to that. Didn't have to bring my lunch.
Okay. Well, look, shall we get into before we get into the discussion around why integration is key to digital transformation, could you give us just a little overview of Adaptiv?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we formed Adaptiv 10 years ago. I have probably 20 years experience working in the integration space, and basically working with my business partner in the fintech space. We sort of identified that we developed a really special set of skills around integration, had solved lots of difficult problems, and we felt that we could bring a lot to the local market. So we established Adaptiv actually 11 years ago today. So Adaptiv turns 11, and we focus primarily on integration strategy, so API-led connectivity, event-driven architectures, etc. Basically, technologies that enable digital transformation, hence, I guess, the topic that we're here to talk about today.
Excellent. So it's fantastic to hear, and that 20 years experience, that's exactly what we're going to be digging into. So now if I could get you to introduce our subject and share with us from your perspective, with your experience, why integration is key to digital transformation.
Cool. So I guess my understanding of digital transformation is really we're looking to, enable better experiences and ways of working for our customers, employees, our partners, and our digital products. Why integration is so important is that it supports, the development of these channels. So organizations these days, they want best-of-breed applications to support their business functions. So they're going to pick a Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever systems they want. And often out of the box, they won't have integration capabilities. So you need integration, to be able to connect those disparate systems. Large enterprises also, tend to have a litany of legacy systems. Everything from COBOL and IBM mainframes. Through to obscure ERPs that are 30 years old. And often, the business will come to IT and expect that these old systems can participate in modern digital, transactions that they were never designed for. So again, integration comes to the rescue, enables you to expose those as modern API driven systems. And I guess technology integration supports strategies like API-led connectivity and event-driven architectures. This allows us to build, reusable business services, that we can use across multiple channels for a consistent experience. So whether you're ordering from your mobile, ordering via web, or say in store, those experiences are seamless and consistent. The other aspect is around event-driven architectures. So typical, legacy integration strategies were once a day, pick up a huge file and deposit it in a system downstream. Using event-driven architectures, we can now enable more real-time experiences. So as someone places an order or an order is fulfilled, being able to send events downstream to customers to notify them, that has been fulfilled. And event-driven architecture also supports robust solutions. So by being able to buffer, your important business messages, if you have outages in your data center or in core systems, you never never lose a message, and things remain up and running. And I think probably the final sort of key point to support digital transformation is that organizations want to be able to do multi-cloud strategies, multi-system strategies, deploy the workloads, where it's most appropriate, and integration gives you the ability to, loosely couple those systems and keep them, in contact with each other.
That is fantastic rundown. Going back to the beginning, when you were talking about the having legacy ERP systems that are 30 years old, and the business comes to the IT team and says, make it work like a modern tool or modern system. And I always laugh. Two worlds I span, and one was in art direction, so designing artwork. And the favourite comment when people come along would be, "Can you just jazz that up a bit?" And in technology, the same sort of thing. Exactly what you're talking about is, can you just not press a button and make it work? So yeah, I actually should have got I've got a great slide that I use that shows the complexities of what it takes to press a button and make it work, to help explain to business people. So some of the stuff that you got into there in terms of event-driven architecture. So there'll be a bunch of people on here who are technical and are just enjoying that. There'll be a bunch of people on here that are a bit like me and need a bit more explanation. So when you talk about event-driven, if we use something like e-commerce and say someone goes in and puts something in the shopping cart, on their app, that's what they do, but in the back end, that's got to send, that's the event that sends the messaging through the integration to the ERP to check that there is actually stock and to hold that stock while that shopping cart's in action. Is that kind of a reasonable description?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess event-driven architectures, and I'm probably going to explain this really badly, and the IT professionals out there will probably slate me. But I guess it's really, the ability to react to changes, that are happening in the environment. So things like order placed, or order fulfilled. Being able to trigger downstream processes without having them really tightly coupled together. I think is probably the sort of key aspect. So if you want to say place an order and guarantee that is fulfilled and is resilient, then technologies like event brokers enable event-driven architectures, and then you can basically do event notifications or patterns like what they call carried event state. Oh god, so this is what I was talking about.
That's right. I know what it's like when you get all of the answer coming through your mind, and it's coming in your mind before it's coming out of your mouth. So it gives
I guess event-driven architecture, you can get quite academic in your responses, and there are nuances that are quite important. But I think at a high level, for non-tech people, it's the ability to be able to react to events of interest. And it can be anything from IoT and sensors emitting readings through to critical business transactions, fraud detection, those sorts of things. So being able to react in real time to events that are happening in your business, and so making you more, data-driven, event-enabled organization.
Gotcha, fantastic. And yes, when you start mentioning those use cases, it starts coming to life for me. So I'm sure that for the other business people in the layman world, it's starting to tick along quite nicely. Now, we've got a few comments that I'd like to, sorry, a few questions. So I'd like to kick off with one of those. And this is from Rob Ford from NZ Post. So he popped this question into the event about a week ago, which is, what trends are you seeing with integration platform adoption in New Zealand? I've noticed smaller organisations moving off the heavyweight platforms in favour of lightweight solutions for perceived cost savings. I might need to stress that word perceived. I don't know if that's going to be an important part of it. Are there any emerging platforms we should be aware of?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It also sort of puts me in a tenuous position with my vendors. So I guess I've sort of had to think through this, and I guess the trend that we're noticing more and more is organisations are wanting to move to what's called a low-code solution towards integration. So traditionally, you need, I guess, integration professionals like ourselves to come in and do all the heavy lifting for integration. But what's happening in the market at the moment, and I think most businesses will see this around technology, is that the market for integration professionals is really tight, and costs are increasing, and supply, is really, really tight. And so organizations want to be able to leverage, operations and IT support teams to do some of these integrations. And so low-code integration platforms allow, users with less integration experience to be able to put together a solution. And so I guess in terms of, the emerging platforms, so I'm going to focus on the platforms that we specialize in, like MuleSoft, Dell Boomi, and Microsoft. So for MuleSoft, we're seeing Salesforce Composer being released. So that's more of a power user solution to be able to build out your own integrations without relying on IT. Microsoft Power Automate, and I think Boomi as a platform is just naturally low code. And so, we're seeing a desire to unlock, unlock the resources that people have in their internal IT teams and not have to be so reliant on integration professionals to get the job done.
Yeah. So is this no-code, low-code platform, is it kind of a comparison of, say, a point-and-click camera to, an SLR camera where you can play with the aperture and you can play with this about any aspect and fine detail? Is that a good way of looking at it?
And that's a good analogy. So, basically with a point-and-click camera in the right conditions, you just click and snap. But then, obviously in certain conditions where it's low light or, you want to capture some specific detail, then you need like a digital SLR. And so that's, really, say, the comparison between, say, the full MuleSoft runtime and, say, the Salesforce Composer. Likewise, in the Microsoft space, having Power Automate versus, Logic Apps and Azure Functions as microservices, etc.
Okay, and let's look at the photographer now. You mentioned that these can be useful for team members that don't have a lot of integration experience. I assume you are meaning IT team members that don't have a lot of integration experience versus, say, someone like me who has no integration experience. So sort of, if you think of the professional photographer with the SLR and what they can do versus someone who's got no photography ability with a point and click as the analogy, it sort of makes me think that there's certainly horses for courses, or there's a level. So is there some way that you with your experience and knowledge can help a client identify what is something that's safe to use the point and click approach versus here's justification why you actually need the real deal, the full story?
That's something we sort of specialize in. So we can come in and help with the integration strategy and basically use the heavyweight integration tools to establish the building blocks for integration and your business services, and then basically enable your power users and your IT teams to be able to leverage off those building blocks to build richer experiences. And so so if we take the Microsoft's Power Platform, you can take the the Power Apps. So it's like the Microsoft Access, point and click and drag. We can expose rich, complex integrations through an API gateway layer, and then Power users can, effectively just pick from a palette of services and drop those in. And so everything's managed and governed behind the scenes. Those Power users can, build the types of experiences they want to rapidly without being too reliant on, core IT to provide those solutions for them.
Oh, sorry. Did you just say don't need to rely on core IT to provide those solutions? So a Power App user could be someone who's a business person?
Yes.
And okay. So what I was thinking before I picked up on that was if in the core of the system is all the heavy lifting, the big integration, the MuleSoft, Dell Boomi, Microsoft, one brand that you mentioned, that enables around the edge of the core for the no-code Power App business person space. So if we're looking at that, what is it? If I was a client and sort of saying, well, what do I need to do? How do I work out if my core's in any good shape, or what? Is there some sort of rule of thumb, line in the sand, where you say, yeah, all of that we would look after and help, and here's how and why, which will then enable the so they're sort of defining the difference between the core and the edge, where you play, where they play.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really down to sort of core, business services, exposing your ERP, exposing payment systems, fulfillment, all those sort of complex integrations. So helping define, what are the core services that support business functions, establishing those as, well-documented, APIs and events, deploying and managing those, and then being able to publish the details of those APIs and events, to users, so that they can see what services are available, what data they can subscribe to, through developer portals and those sorts of things. And then, basically that gives them the guardrails to then go off and leverage those assets to build upon their own experiences.
So we've just got a related question pop in the comments from Sam Tuino at Kiwi Rail. Probably what I was meaning to ask, won't say what I was meaning to ask, but a better way of asking it is, what needs to be set up to allow the business to fill their boots with low-code development? And that's where I was sort of leaning to is, you need to write the APIs, you need to be able to connect all the legacy systems. That's the, imagine connecting SAP to, I don't know what, but that's usually one of the big questions. To then, what do you need to, what needs to be set up to allow the businesses to fill their boots with low-code development?
Yeah, so I think you need to establish a capability. So, and this sort of leads into some of the other sort of responses that I've got, but setting up what they call centers for excellence, centers for enablement, really determining the strategy for your organization. So how are you going to deliver solutions? How are you going to guide people and process to, I guess, move fast to deliver integration? And often you don't have to do a big bang approach. You can start small and, work your way up. So if you're an organization starting from net zero integration, then, you pick the low hanging fruits, the proof of values that you can do, and you start there. And you start with a consistent strategy about how you're going to approach it. You measure. Well, you establish what business outcomes you want to align with, what business functions you need to support. You set about establishing your platform and then measuring, I guess, the success of that delivery. And then, you iterate and you build upon those capabilities. So think about it as, I think a good analogy is build it like a building. So you're starting out with good foundations, then you're, adding the interior, adding the exterior, you're adding the cladding. So you're not going to be able to build a house instantly right from the start, but you're going to build upon the foundations, and each component you add, I guess, adds to the overall picture.
I'll put it this way: if you build the house as in the core, it enables me to do the gardening, maybe stain the deck once a summer. Just looking at my deck outside the window. But yeah, those things around the heavy lifting. All right, well, let's have a look at our next question. And this one is from Chris Lowther from Becca. So thank you, Chris, for that. And his question is, for organizations with a set of hardwired legacy applications, Looking to upgrade, what are the major benefits of integration and how might these be presented to make a compelling business case? After all, it's just infrastructure, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly integration is, I guess, probably more of an application than infrastructure. But yeah, so I guess in terms of, building a business case for integration, I guess it's sort of twofold. It's one, looking at, what are the problems that you face? What are the issues that you have with your existing integrations? So, the cost of outages. If you've got a critical business system that's built on a flaky legacy hardwired integration, the cost of outages can run to the millions, for every hour of downtime that you have. I think, in building the business case, you can sort of put forward an argument around better productivity to deliver integrations, so moving faster to add value. The ability to, and so as discussed before, as you're delivering assets, you can reuse those business functions. So, as you add APIs, you have a richer ecosystem. Subsequent projects become faster and more cost effective to deliver. As we sort of discussed earlier, you're able to unlock those legacy business systems. So maybe defer that, that re-platforming for a core system, leverage APIs to expose those business services and get more value. So you're going to save some money on, large projects. I think another benefit as well is moving from batch to real time. So the whole event-driven architecture, unlocking new experiences that are better for customers and employees. And then, kind of looking into highlighting, I guess, the cost to build and maintain these legacy platforms. So you often end up with single point of failure resource issues. So that one person that's been with the organization for 10, 15 years, if they leave the organization, then you're left with nobody to maintain systems. And then again, I think highlighting the ability to unlock, new services and channels to support the business, so your customers, your employees, your partners, and your digital products. If you're using legacy hardwired applications, you're not going to be able to easily provide, those new experiences.
And can I just check? Everyone might have different interpretation, but there might be a standard meaning to hardwired. I take it that is that they're so built into so many systems that it's hard to replace them. Is that the reference to hardwired would likely mean? Or?
Yeah, I guess it's the tight coupling. So typically, if you go to your IT team and say, look, system A needs to talk to system B, they'll go, cool, we're going to build a solution that connects system A to system B. But you lose a lot of the ability to reuse those integrations. If you need to then add system C, you're basically building all of this from scratch most of the time. And then, it's what they call integration spaghetti. Okay,
that makes sense to me. I can see that in my mind in terms of all of the different, I'll call them APIs that are communicating from one part to another part. Okay, so let's look at Chris's second question. Is it realistic to expect to be able to achieve integration of business systems across a multi-cloud and on-prem ecosystem, and how?
Yeah. So that's something that's totally possible. Some platforms are more successful than others. So the ones that tend to be really successful are the ones that can run anywhere. So the ability to run in a containerized infrastructure. In some cases, you can even run on IoT devices. So you can run Mule ESB on a Raspberry Pi, and running in VMs, etc. So basically, that gives you, I guess, cross-platform portability. So you can run that in Google's cloud, you can run that in your data center, you can run that in Microsoft or AWS. The ones that don't do as well are the ones that tend to have to reach into your network remotely. So it sort of introduces latency. I think combined with this, if you leverage event brokers, so platforms like Solus that we specialize in, you can loosely couple those applications, and basically to a point where location no longer matters. So you could have a business service running on somebody's laptop. As long as it's got an internet connection and it can reach the broker, then you'll be able to integrate between all of those systems in a resilient manner. And then, yeah, I think probably one of the other key things as well is being able to deploy your workloads close to where they're useful, so to eliminate that latency. So that's one of the big challenges we have at the moment, having to go across to Australia to do a request, come back to New Zealand to get the data, and then go back to Australia to return that response. And that core system could be sitting in the cupboard next to you, but you've just done this huge hop. So if you can deploy devices close to where you need the workloads, then that makes it more successful.
Excellent. So if I use my hands again, if the different parts are all close together, then the latency is usually not a problem. But if they're all over the place, come back to your spaghetti concept, then that is latency and therefore performance issues at the I guess the user end is one thing, but potentially in other areas as well.
I think, with modern, I guess, networking technologies and the improvements in speed, it's less, become less of an issue, and you can work through it. But it's, you can have a better experience if you can deploy close to the edge. And I think you were seeing this in IoT, more and more. So devices that can do more work out in the field and then communicate smaller amounts of data based on decisions they're making.
Yeah. So I've got a question that's just come in. It's sort of in this legacy. I'll say it's legacy. They haven't said legacy, but what they've said, if I pop that up on screen, as I've said, some of the ERP software upgrade only core and not the code during a version update. How could this challenge be addressed without impacting integration? Is that a question for the ERP vendor, or is that a question for you as integration?
I'm just trying to interpret this. So
yeah, yes, I took a couple of reads on myself, but I think what they're saying is the ERP software only upgrade a core part or something and not the code. I'm not quite sure how that could actually happen during a version update.
Well, I guess I'll try and answer this just in terms of, I guess, approach to versioning. So, that's one of the challenges with integration is that systems are continuously changing, and what we really want to do is, reduce the impact on our consumers. And so, having a robust versioning strategy so that you can support side-by-side implementations without introducing too much complexity. And so that's, versioning data at the contract level and also versioning services at the implementation level, I guess at the endpoint level. So if you're connecting APIs, it's always nice to have a version in the URI. If you're connecting to event brokers, likewise, it's good to have a version in the URI for connecting to that broker. And then having versioning within the data sort of allows you a bit of flexibility. It's a really complex topic and difficult to deal with, but
well, thank you very much. I actually got the concept of what you're sharing there, and I think it's Vishal Patil. So he's in the comments there. You can have a wee look later. Perhaps there's someone some help there that he might need. But yeah, I can gather the response there. So let's move to a question from Andrew, because we're just coming up on 10:30. Let's see if we can get as many of these in as possible. So Andrew Gooden asked, how do you go about shaping the people and process part of an integration journey?
Yeah. So this comes down to, I guess, establishing centers for excellence, or as we all call it, centers for enablement. So it's basically sorting out your people, your process, roles and responsibilities about how you're going to approach integration. So Mule have a framework called Catalyst, and it's fantastic. And it's, I think, one of the things that makes Mule stand out amongst other vendors. Microsoft doesn't have a framework like this. It's really up to, I guess, consultants to build on this. And so to help, I guess, shape people, on their journey, helping them understand what the business outcomes are that they need to achieve, a blueprint for how they're going to deliver the technology, and then how you're going to enable the organization to use the technology is key. So, having people understand what their roles and responsibilities are, and then the processes for delivering integration is key. And then basically, you have to look in your organization and sort of work out, are you appropriately resourced? Are people enabled for success? And I think developing training plans off the back of this to ensure that people have the skills to fulfill the roles that they're being assigned to is key. So too often organizations will just pick up some pick a technology, throw it in the mix and go, cool, this technology is going to guarantee success. But the problem is people haven't been trained appropriately, don't understand their processes, they don't understand their role in the digital transformation. And so, that's where you can, I guess, look to hire new skills in. You can work with partners like us to augment your team. And then, so that's, I guess, my sort of summary version.
Yeah, no, that makes really sense. I always have to bring in a rugby analogy somewhere, and I know that Phil will be listening and will enjoy this. But it's like going to a soccer football team with a rugby ball and saying, you're going to play rugby in 5 minutes. Here's the ball, and that's the tool. And the outcome that people want to do is have them play like the All Blacks. But of course, they don't know the processes of how to play rugby. They don't know how to scrum. They don't know how to pass. They've got the tool, but they're not going to achieve All Black level gameplay because they've just been given a tool with the expectation of meeting the outcome of playing like the All Blacks, but don't have the training, don't have the knowledge, don't know how to get there. So yeah, really cool. Hey, we're just on 10:30, so I just wanted to check with you if you were okay for a minute, or whether you had to get back to clients.
We can keep going. I've blocked out this whole hour. So.
Oh wow, okay. We'll try not to use the whole hour because people have got a book that they're having their cup of coffee, morning tea. So they can always refer back to it, which is why I put the timestamps in the comments when you see me leaning over to the side. For anyone wondering what I'm doing. So let's go to one from Chris Collins. So he asked, can you explain what data fabric is versus data virtualization? Are there any specific considerations that need to be made for companies looking to be more digital with these technologies? How would one govern integration tech? A couple of parts to that one.
Yeah, I guess I've sort of prepared really only a response for the first part of that. So at Adaptiv, we sort of made a choice early on to go, I guess, 100 feet deep on application integration. So that's really our specialty. We work with API gateways, middleware, and event brokers. And so data integration, and especially concepts around data fabric and data virtualization, are a really sort of specialist area. And so we work with partners like Data Engine and Akash. They specialize in this. This is their bread and butter. And so this is something that we've, I guess, chosen not to get into because it's another. We recognised it's another set of skills, and it sort of takes away from, I guess, our expertise around integration strategy. It's a space we'd like to get into, but it's certainly quite a bit different. And sort of adding into that, I sort of had a bit of a read around the data fabrics and data virtualization. I think where our skill sets can help is around tools for integration. Supporting message translation, protocol translation, and then also, I guess, the event mesh from the event brokers. So being able to supply data in real time. So we've done projects where all the events we've created for a solution are fed directly into platforms like Snowflake in real time. So as somebody places an order, a copy goes to Snowflake as an order is fulfilled or cancelled or whatever, and then you can do basically in real time where we're supplying that data, I guess, into the fabric or the virtualized data structures.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, both for what you could answer and for identifying where you do and don't work, because there's that Richard Branson post that goes through saying, say yes to everything, then work out how to do it. But it's been one of the, I guess, bugbears of IT and how people perceive IT, or some of the stereotypes that's been created, where people will take on a job and then charge you to work out how to do it. In which case, you've just said, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. So it's a really upfront, honest approach, and I'm sure the industry absolutely appreciates that type of service and type of communication. So good on you for taking that approach and answering the question.
I think it's far too stressful to say yes to everything and then struggle to sort of catch up and work out how to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, we've got one more, and then two more, and then we'll wrap up. So Ben Smythe has asked quite an open question, which is, what or who do you find to often be the biggest threat to enabling digital transformation in the workplace? What's the biggest threat?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, for me, it's an underinvestment in DevOps is the biggest threat. So DevOps is, I guess, all the processes underpinning, your application lifecycle management, from gathering requirements to testing the software, building, delivering, and then operating it. So too often, we'll see organizations, with a Greenfields project rush to start deploying things and get things running, but they don't look at, the DevOps processes around how they're going to automate this. So DevOps is the underpinning of Agile. So if businesses want to move fast, then a good investing in DevOps, supports that. So, if you rush off and just start deploying things and you underinvest in automation, you'll find months later down the track that you're struggling to make changes. Your release cadence has ground to a halt. You've built up a whole lot of technical debt. So the most successful projects I've seen, have a good investment in DevOps up front. They automate as much as they can. They're pragmatic about it, and they invest in test automation. And the sort of net results are, after a year, their cadence hasn't slowed down, and if anything, they've gained more experience in DevOps, and they're speeding up, and just fantastic outcomes. And the people in operations, the developers, are typically a lot happier because things are going a lot smoother. No big bang deployments, and working through weekends trying to deploy complex solutions. It's you're pressing a button, and you're watching, I guess, the magic unfold.
Excellent. Well, that's a really good answer in terms of what are the biggest threats. And I've often thought to myself, what's the relationship between DevOps and Agile? Because it's almost Agile's the process, and DevOps is actually doing it with the tools. But I did have a little bit of confusion. But when you said DevOps is the underpinning of Agile, that makes complete sense to me, and just gave me a great perspective on that. So thank you very much. So let's move on to our last question that we have here before we wrap up and give a summary. So Anthony McMahon asks, and this possibly goes back to that question around low code, no code. When I say this, what are the risks businesses should be aware of associated with indirect integration solutions such as Zapier?
Yeah, so I think tools like Zapier and those kind of, I guess, drag, drop, point and click, where you've got a single source and a single kind of destination. They're great for, I guess, new organizations and startups where using predominantly SaaS and cloud-based systems, where the integration requirements are relatively simple. I think the risks is that you end up with a strong tendency for point-to-point solutions. So basically that whole legacy tightly coupled, but reimagined on modern technology and cloud. So you end up with a lack of reuse. And then if you have to support hybrid architectures where you've got to connect to systems on premise, you can come unstuck. And then again, when the complexity ramps up, these tools tend to lack a bit of extensibility. But that said, if you just want to get data from A to B and don't care about the aspects of reuse and API-led connectivity, then the tools can work, but they have their limits. So
yeah. So when you talk about that, the examples I've seen of the use of Zapier is an email comes in, and when it lands, the Zapier then automates a ticket, as in like an event ticket to AFQY, back that email, or something simple like that, which when you say point to point, that makes sense in my head. So I'm starting to learn your tech jargon. But it also made me think of RPA, so robotic process automation, which to me, that same sort of thing. An email comes in with a whole bunch of data instead of a human scraping it and entering it into fields. RPA, an example, example is it would do that copy and paste for the human to, efforts. They all seem very similar. Is this sort of like a integrations on one end and RPAs on the other end? Is Zapier no code? Sort of like
probably closer to the RPA side. So I think it's like horses for courses. If you're looking to automate, some of your personal processes, then tools like Zapier and such are really, really good. But I think they can kind of be used in conjunction with enterprise-grade integration. So again, you do all the heavy lifting with a tool like MuleSoft exposing rich APIs, and then you can have business users using a tool like Zapier to integrate, with some of those APIs and their Outlook inbox, etc., like as you've described.
Yeah. So just thinking about some of the terms you've used, and I tend to visualize things, and that's where the analogies come from. But if you talk about point to point, and that being limitation for reuse, whereas a rich API, I think of it almost like a tree, with the trunk being the core part of everything. And then you have all these branches that go off, and that's almost getting to the point to point. But it's if each branch was a feature or function that was enabled with all the data that possibly could come through the trunk. That's a bit messy. But I'm just trying to understand.
Perhaps think about like I don't know, a Lego set or something. It's got individually APIs just look like a Lego block, but you can compose complex solutions with lots of blocks, and basically anything you can build with your Legos, you can kind of build out with your your business service Lego squares kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of a good analogy. I always forget about my Lego. Used to have a lot of that as a kid. Okay. Well, look. Let's start to wrap up. Let's start thinking about a summary in terms of, we're looking at the question of why integration is key to digital transformation, and then we've looked at all these different aspects, some questions, etc. So if I could come back to you, sort of something along the lines of a closing remark, wrapping all these different aspects together with what you shared to begin with, and what's sort of like a final closing remark that you would leave everybody with, so that they can take away and think about that, and possibly come back and talk to you directly.
Yeah, so I guess technology isn't the key to the digital transformation. Like it's a component of it, but I think it's investment in people, process, and strategy to use the technology effectively, which makes integration key to digital transformation success. So integration is not going to save your digital transformation, but it's going to go a long way towards enabling it.
Love that. That's a statement I'm going to put in the note here. So I'd like to say thank you to you for all your time and effort. Thank you for the subject as well. Great subject. Why integration is key to digital transformation. Now let me just see if I get that right. Digital integration won't save your transformation, but it will enable it. So it's sort of something that you've got to take into consideration at the beginning and get that right, so that it can enable a big transformation program, rather than it being trying to use as a savior at the end if it wasn't done right from the beginning. But yeah, excellent.
Awesome.
So thank you to you, and thank you to Adaptiv. It's been an excellent What the Tech session. We've had a good constant stream of viewers, comments, and engagement. So I look forward to seeing that build over time. And we'll say ka kite anō. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks again, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much. Cheers.
So.